Good morning. Let everybody file in. There's seats over here too, if you want to. We'll just all wave at you when you come across. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I am in conference attire, golf course conference attire, in an imperfect mood this morning. Admittedly, I checked the tee times and there was a 7:32 available, and I got my ass on the golf course this morning. So, and in a completely irreverent mood, I am showing up in my golf attire. So maybe you'll find me in a dress later, but for now, this is what you get. And anyone who makes, terrible comments, we're gonna ping golf balls at you. So, but thank you guys for joining. This is a very special session, I think, with a very special set of speakers, and I have the honor of moderating this conversation. I'm Rina Pandey. I am now a partner at a firm called Oxion, which many of you may know is a executive search and investment firm. I'm a physician by background, catching my breath, and spent chapter 1 of my career as an academic doc, chapter 2 as the chief medical officer at Able2, and chapter 3 dedicated to helping all my fellow clinician leaders really have their impact at the intersection of business and clinical and data and tech and product, because I strongly believe we need great clinician voices to drive amazing clinical innovation and really smart and strong and healthy business growth. And without that, I think all the innovation happening out here doesn't stand a chance of succeeding. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask my friends to just introduce themselves. We'll go down the line. And we're going to spend this next 45 minutes talking about what it means to be a clinician leader, an executive, and to live at that intersection. One last thought. We do have the opportunity to do Q&A at the end. We're talkers, so we might as well eat up the whole time, but we're going to try to leave some time for Q&A. You can scan the QR code up here, and that gives you access to an app called Slide, and you can submit your questions online. I'll be monitoring that. If we don't get questions and people want to come to the mic, we can do that too, but the room is a little tricky for that, so feel free to put them in that way, and yeah. Pass the baton to Erin.
Okay, I'll be brief too. So I am Dr. Erin Parks. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I co-founded Equip, and I serve as their chief clinical officer.
And I am Rachel Ledbetter is what I'm going back to. My name up there says Rachel McCrickard. My divorce is almost final. Thank you. It's a happy day. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Motivo.
Good morning. I'm Mona Potter. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist by training. I am Chief Medical Officer and co-founder at InStride Health.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Nikki Tesler, CEO and co-founder of Be Me, and we're combining engaging technology and human touch to help all teenagers be their best selves. Pleasure to be here today.
And I'm Dr. Jess Galton. I'm a neonatologist, a mom of 2. I overcame postpartum depression when I was in my medical training and started Family Well to support new moms and their mental health. And our mission is to solve the perinatal mental health crisis. So thank you for having me. I have a little bit of a sore throat, so bear with me.
We can't tell. Can I see a show of hands, actually, of who are clinicians in the audience? Oh, I love it. Who's married to a clinician? Mark Potter. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Who's hired a clinician? Okay. And who's struggled managing a clinician? Fewer hands. I love it. Okay, good. Not to generalize. I want to just reflect on, first of all, the titles. So I think we clinicians are often put in a little box, and that box is clinical subject matter expert. And sometimes people forget that we're capable of a crap load more than that. And you heard founder, chief clinical officer, you heard founder, CEO, you heard chief medical officer, you heard founder, chief CEO, you heard a lot of breadth of titles. And so I want to just open by asking you guys, what it takes, what are the characteristics and qualities, because I want to move away from titles actually, and talk about capabilities and qualities and skills, because it's really all that matters. like, what are the qualities that you had to bring to your role or that you see are needed to be a great clinician leader in the business environment? Yeah, I know, we're gonna be here all day. Should I pick on you, or you guys, we're all friends here, so this is dangerous.
Well, it's an interesting one to start with me because I will say that for me it was I was a clinician administrator in the academic system for 20 years before co-founding InStride. So by then I was like, I know what I'm good at, I know what I like to do, and I know what I'm definitely not good at. So what was important to me when we were co-founding InStride was that our co-founding team complemented each other. And so I like my identity as a clinician. And so I like to be the clinician on the team, and John, our CEO, is here. Sorry, John, I'm calling you out. But thanks for being here. But it was finding the partner who was going to help challenge me and who also wanted to be challenged by me. Do I get to call on somebody?
I'll go so that I check the box.
Someone else. I just heard that phrase.
For me, I was also brought up in the academic clinical world and went to the schools that you strive to go to, and I was very fortunate to go to some of the best medical institutions. And I just realized during my medical training that I just didn't fit into the box. Like, I was always the one saying, well, why do we do it this way? Why can't we do it this way? And I was always told, no, Jess, that's how you do it at Harvard. No, Jess, that's how you do it at Hopkins. No, Jess, that's how you do it at Penn. And so I was like the person that was always trying to figure out new and creative ways to do things and make things more efficient. And I just felt like, for me, I personally couldn't do that in the academic world. I needed to do it within the confines of a startup, to be creative, innovative, break the mold, and figure out new and more efficient ways to bring these types of services to healthcare.
Erin or
For
Rachel?
me, I would just say that I've tried to lean into my clinical skills as a CEO. As a clinician, you're like the best tool for therapeutic change, so how healthy you are, the clinicians in the room know this, how healthy you are as a clinician has a direct impact on how well you're able to serve your patients. And I feel the same way about being a CEO. How healthy I am is a direct reflection of how I'm able to lead. So I always saw things like going on a run or taking a day off or going to therapy as part of my job description and very much integral to the business's success. And I've even noticed that sometimes when I go through hard times, it's when the business suffers as well. I also, my undergrad is in Bible. That's a degree that's available to people. Very highly marketable skill. So I did a lot of sermons in my undergrad. And so I think storytelling for me has played a big part in my role as a CEO, being able to share stories with obviously investors and customers and inspire people. Those are all skills that I've leveraged. I don't know how to use a spreadsheet, never will. I don't know the word amortization. I don't know what that means. I've told John, our president, I'm never going to learn that word. So I will, debunk the myth that you need to know everything or you need to have an MBA. You need to be able to know what your limits are and hire the right people to do those things. But there's definitely far more that you can probably bring to the table that you are unaware of as a clinician. That's what I found to be true.
I feel like you and I are a little bit yin-yang. So I would say I was kind of the opposite. Well, I felt like I had to learn every single thing, right? So all day long, I would write on one side of the notebook every word or really acronym that our finance team would say that I went through that. I know that.
Wait, is that how they said it or how you say it?
Instead of finance. Even ask Liam. Liam's a finance, not finance.
Is that what you say? All right, I gotta
right? I'm a good student of listening to whatever, and I write it all down and I Google it. And I really put an enormous amount of pressure on myself to not just bring my clinical skills, but figure out finance and marketing and ops. And it wasn't until I got a pretty great mentor who told me, as soon as you start enjoying the skills you already have and stop trying to get all these other skills, you're probably going to enjoy work a little bit more. And so I think there's this push-pull from recognizing we have things other than clinical skills, but also not feeling like you have to acquire every single one.
Yeah. Nikki?
Yeah, and for me, I think the quality has been about cognitive flexibility. It's been nothing's mutually exclusive, and I think as clinician, business people, you've got to hold both. And the stigma attached, like I remember starting out as a psychologist, and they're like, no, you need your MBA to run a hospital. I'm like, don't I need to be a psychologist to run this hospital? It's a mental health hospital. And I'm, to this day, first and foremost a clinician. But in order to play the game, you've got to be able to understand the other side always. I was trained very psychoanalytically, but I purposely defended both from a psychoanalytic lens when I went for my thesis, as well as for cognitive behavioral therapy, because I knew I needed to understand both. And I've done the same with business. You have to understand the business acumen and chops to fight the stigma that surrounds us around, like, clinicians can't do business. Yeah, you can do it, and you can even do it better. One of my favorite mentors said to me, Nikki, you are either going to make the best CEO or the worst. And I'm like, okay, that's hopeful. and they were like, well, no, let me tell you why. Because as a clinician, you're going to over-identify with the people. And that's wonderful. You'll be a people-first leader. But if you don't figure out the business and the financial side, then you're doing no service. You'll commit financial suicide at that point. And I've always taken that with me. And I've seen a lot of people that can't hold both, and they can't straddle. So cognitive flexibility to me has been, I'm still learning it, but
Yeah.
I'm on my way.
I love that. I think, I think our title even says "at the intersection of," which I think is so critical, right? I think you have to. We have a little scratchiness. Is that from someone's mic? I just want to nip that in the bud before it. Yeah? No? Everybody's good? And also, before I continue my thought, there are not many, but a few seats over here if people want to come all the way in. I'll give you that opportunity so you don't have to sit on the ground. And there's a handful. Alex Tovitz, raise your hand. There's one next to Alex. I don't know you guys, but there's seats next to you guys. And I'm sure you're lovely people and are great to sit next to. Are we good? There's a few over here too. Hate for people to have to stand. Excellent. I love it. Excellent. Okay, great. I think, living at that intersection is key. And I have heard clinicians who are, say, I don't do finance. I don't do that. I just focus on the clinical. And we need those clinicians too. No offense intended there. But at the leadership table, I think we have to be able to meet our partners part way. And so I think there is an obligation to learn some of the terms and to be able to speak some of the language. How do you guys feel about that, Mona?
I think it's fun. I mean, that's what I think triggered me to want to leave academia to get to go do this. I was actually watching my husband, Mark, who is an entrepreneur and so envious of this ability to get to bring different minds together to solve hard problems. And so to be able to say that this is what I bring, this is my experience, this is my excitement, and to couple that or blend that with others who approach the same problem from different angles, it's just added this world of maybe we can solve these really hard problems that we didn't think we could solve. So,
well, it makes sense that all of us who spent 10 years in school are like, oh, look, we get to learn some more. And I think there's a little bit of that, too.
That's a good point. Always learning, aren't we?
I think that is one of the unlocks too, and one of the qualities that I think I can say confidently, no, I'm going to say confidently, we all have on stage, is the curiosity, right? A lot of times, at least my experience in academia is oftentimes as the doctor, you're expected to know everything and you make the decision and then people follow, right? First of all, I've never been that person. But also I think in this role, being curious and asking a lot of questions and recognizing we don't know everything, and leaning on other people with other specialization and perspectives. I am not a behavioral health provider, but I lead a behavioral health company. And the reason I'm able to do that is because there are really smart people around me. But being curious and open-minded, I think, is a key quality trait.
And to build on that, I think for me, mental health I'm obsessed with. The passion that comes from me is, I can't really probably put into words. The only way to break through the low innovation field mental health has been in as clinician is to figure out the financial innovation that accompanies that. So for me, it's fueled by that desire to solve this, unbelievable, I would say, we're not on even footing, I would say, with the rest of the field, the medical service lines, right? We're not sexy for-profit cancer or cardiac, and the only way to leap forward is going to be to crack the code on how you take clinical innovation and you accompany it or pair it with finance. And so it's really me being moved as a thought leader and really a passion for this space that gets me to like really lean into this, for sure.
Yeah, and I'll just say I can completely relate to the idea of learning being an exciting part of this journey. I mean, I've really leaned into my clinical skills, but I have enjoyed learning about all the other different parts. I mean, you can't be the CEO and not be the one who is talking to investors. Like, they want to hear from you, so you have to like hone that skill of being able to explain things in a way that's like, business minded and kind of business first. And that was definitely a challenge for me, especially as more of a mission driven founder. The main pushback we always got about Motivo is it just doesn't seem like it's that big of a problem. We solve clinical supervision. So how big is this market? And they want to see, billions and billions of dollars. And so I wasn't really able to communicate that in the early days of painting that really big picture, something that I have had to learn over the years. And that it's been an exciting part of it to learn that. So
awesome. We're going to get to the gaps in a second, because I think it's important to call out, and everybody else calls it out, the gaps that we clinicians bring. But I want to start, actually, I want to lean into the positives, which you've actually kind of touched on, but I want to just have us focus there. Because I do think clinicians bring something very unique and special. And not just that we're clinicians, but like this, I want you guys to, I want you to tease out, like, what is it that is so special in the business world? Not just that we understand clinical, but that makes us really well poised to be leaders in this world.
I mean, I think if we were all here representing, different fashion companies, then it'd be like, I don't know why a clinician would be there, but these are all clinical companies. In the same way you would never have an expert in operations, an expert in people skills, an expert in finance. Like, you need a clinical expert at a clinical company.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we're founders as well really helps to set the tone of why we're doing it, what makes doing it in this way different. Right. Why are you coming to a startup for your healthcare versus a really well-named hospital, for instance? I almost feel like you can't not have a clinician.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm kind of making you guys guess what I'm thinking, so it's kind of not fair. But, you mentioned cognitive flexibility as something, and I think that's those clinicians in the room, like, we've been in situations where you have to hold a lot of information and be able to distill it. You have to kind of just create order from chaos, right? That's a thing we do really, really well. I'm a diagnostician. I'm a cardiologist, actually, by training. Like, this is what I do. You give me, like, company chaos, I go, okay, like, here are the 4 buckets of problems. Here's how we're going to test. Here's how we're going to learn. Here's how we're going to iterate, right? Like, that's what my brain does. This is a little bit what I'm getting at. Like, what other just things that you've learned in your clinical expertise actually lend themselves really well to being applied in the business environment.
One thing I'll add, I love this story of Paul Graham. If you guys know him, he's like the founder of Y Combinator. It's a huge accelerator that Airbnb and a number of other different successful startups came out of in San Francisco. And he was teaching like a group of Stanford students in an entrepreneurship class, and they were asking him, like, how do I come up with like my big idea? Like, I want to do a startup, I want to get rich. Like, how can I come up with my idea? And he was like, you're approaching it the wrong way. He said, go and learn a trade and then figure out what are the problems that exist in that industry. And I feel like for me, nobody outside of the industry would have solved clinical supervision. I feel strongly about that. People don't even know what it means. If you're not in the world of as a clinician, you don't know how hard it is. You don't know how many people fall through the cracks in the early years of the profession because of it. So, that's a piece that's like really important to me, is being able to explain to all the business people how hard this problem is to solve and why it's important that a company is like helping with this.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can underestimate what it means when you love something. You get knocked down all the time. I mean, okay, I'll speak for myself. I'm sitting up here, but for sure by the end of the day, I'll be knocked down again. And the only thing to get you back up is whatever gets the hair on the back of your neck to stand up. And it's a love, you know, and for what you do and the passion. And I'm so sick and tired of people seeing clinicians as if there's something wrong or that's a liability. That actually is a competitive advantage, because you'll get back up and you won't quit and you'll keep going because you care beyond anything else. And I think there's something to really be said about that.
And I think we try to bring that out in everyone around us too, right? Because I think that we are constantly realizing how hard it is to do what we do and how hard it is to do what we ask our clinicians to do every day. And so to really have been there, walked that walk, done that, it's like you know which problems are problems that are just non-negotiable to manage, and then which ones you can say, actually, we can put this one aside, even though it's not ideal. Again, kind of productive caring or kind of perfectionism, all these phrases, right? But really being able to figure out, in the end, what we're doing really matters. And we also have to hold the side of, like, we can't do everything perfectly. And so how do we blend that? We were talking about DBT, and so we bring in the clinical learnings into kind of org structure, and I think that's actually been something really beneficial. So.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. I think that one thing that I take from my clinical practice to the startup world is being able to triage, right? Like, there are a million different fires you're trying to put out in a single day, but what's really the most important, right? Like, 1, 2, 3, I got to do these 3 things today, and if I don't check everything else off of my list, that's okay, because I really have to just hone in on, like, what are the things that are okay. In the medical world, it's like, I used to do these rounds at night with the residents, and I don't think they liked it, but basically it was like disaster rounds, right? At midnight, I would say, okay, I'm a neonatologist in the NICU. I would say, all right, which babies in the NICU are the sickest? And then the residents would have to tell me, and I would say, okay, what's the worst case scenario you can think of? And, like, it was dying or, you know, something like that. And so we would come up with a strategy just in case, right? And so I think that one thing I've brought to FamilyWell is being able to say, okay, these are our top priorities. Forget about everything else, not for too long. But for today, let's solve these things, right? Because these are critical. And so I think that is a skill that I learned as an intensivist.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I do want to just be honest about what gaps clinicians sometimes bring. I mean, I hate to generalize, and it's certainly it's not generalizable, but there are some gaps, right? So maybe we can just own them, and then we can talk about how you have and how we all can help clinicians fill those gaps.
I would love to start at this end of the stage. So I think that clinicians, this is something that we struggle with, especially in an early stage startup with clinicians. There's a bit of, like, rigidity or inflexibility sometimes, because a lot of clinicians, understandably, this is how we're trained, a lot of clinicians, like, they're like, okay, I want to know exactly what I need to do, check the box, and I'm done. And it's a very straight path, right? Like, to become a clinician, you know exactly what you need to do at every stage. And so some clinicians that we've hired have trouble with that at a startup, right? Because it's not rigid. There's a lot unknown. You're building the plane as you're flying it, and it's a little bit of a disconnect for some people, and not comfortable at all for people who are used to the structure.
What else do you guys think?
For me, it's been like the pressure to grow has been a big one. You know, I'm big on everybody feeling good, everybody feeling safe, making sure that, like, I'm creating a good culture for people, that sort of thing, and that we're solving a real problem, and that we're, you know, having clinicians and our supervisors kind of at the center of that. But I mean, truly, you know, startups are very vulnerable. Most of them don't succeed, you know, and it really is kind of a grow or die scenario. Like, you can't keep going as a company if you don't grow, you know, especially before you're profitable. So having to always kind of return to that place of like, in order to serve our therapists and to make sure that more of them come into the field, we have to be focused on revenue and on growth. We have to be thinking about our expenses. We have to be hiring, correctly. We have to be making hard decisions about when to terminate somebody. All of those things are hard to do. I have found it hard to do as a clinician, but I always just try to bring my mind back to the fact that if we don't exist, we can't serve anybody. And so maintaining a focus on growth has been a big one for me, a big gap that I've tried to learn.
That's great.
And Rachel, absolutely. And then thinking about how, as you build your culture and you have your clinicians who, again, they're frontline with these, we're pediatric mental health, right? We are treating these vulnerable kids, and they have this responsibility to them. We have a responsibility to them. And if we make a change in leadership, for example, because we've noticed that somebody's really struggling with this ability to kind of hold both, what does that do to the culture? What does that do to the conversations that are happening with our providers, with our clinicians on the ground of how they perceive the direction of the company? Yep. And so really being able to both hold that intention of understanding our purpose and our mission is people driven, and in order to survive, we have to own the business. But how do we marry the two in a really genuine, transparent way? I think that's been something we talk about a lot.
And I think what I would say is an old mentor of mine, may he rest in peace, Joe Monahan, for anybody. He said to me early on, he's like, Nikki, you can have all the insight you want. He's like, so what? And I was like, okay. And he's like, what are you going to do with that insight? And I feel like we're very introspective people, right? There's so much superpowers around being introspective and sensitive and all of that. But I think what the business side teaches you is health costs. It teaches you the health costs of your company, and it teaches you to take action. So what you do with those insights, it's just like responsibility. You can apologize, but what do you do action-wise to take those responsibilities? And I think that second step is something that we don't always convert and translate to. That's really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've talked a bit about strengths that we bring, or qualities that are unique and special. We've talked about some of the gaps. It lends itself well to the next thing I'd like to talk about, which is how do you think non-clinicians could work best with us? Or how do you work well with your non-clinician? Wow, a lot of laughter. I guess we're mostly clinicians here, but there's a lot. Wait, non-clinicians, please raise your hand. I didn't ask the question that way. Okay.
It's like a self-help group for people who have to work with us.
Exactly. That's exactly what this is, with us telling them how to do it. I love this. As someone who didn't share any weaknesses, I'm ready to take this.
Yeah. Did you hear the question, Mona?
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so my question was, how do you recommend for the non-clinicians in the group, how they best collaborate with us clinicians? And I guess the vice versa is, how do you work with your non-clinician peers to achieve the outcomes you seek in your companies?
I think something for me is that as clinicians, debating was a very, very normal part of our training and our delivering of care. You would sit and debate on the diagnosis. What additional tests would we need to order? How are we going to talk to the parents about it? What intervention should we choose? And debate was frequent, healthy, every meeting, every patient, all the time. I think there might be a few people who've worked with me who would like me to debate with them a little bit less. No need to raise any hands. A lot of quipsters in the audience. But so I think that understanding that for, I think, a lot of clinicians, debating is a bit of a love language, and it's a way that we are taught to process live and in the moment, right? You don't meet a patient and then go to a private room to look things up, right? You're sitting with your colleagues and processing live, whereas not everybody processes that way, and it can be maybe exhausting. And so I think for clinicians, I think recognizing that different people process in different ways and not everything needs to be debated the way it does in clinical. And then I think for non-clinicians, knowing that it's coming from a place of love versus criticality.
I think too, for me, it has less to do of clinician, non-clinician, and more to do about healthy EQ or not healthy EQ. You know, like the people that work at Motivo, like I trust them. I trust their thought processes. I know they're doing their own work. They check their own ego. Like all of those are skills that I look for when, you know, I'm hiring somebody. I think there are clinicians who aren't healthy or like don't check their own ego, all of that sort of stuff. So for me, it's like more about those qualities that I'm looking for than it is, you know, how do we work together? I think that comes.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think what is the golden rule is to treat others the way we'd want to be treated, but the platinum rule is to treat them the way they want to be treated. And when you deal with like big companies, there's so many different, you know, tensions and everybody operates differently. And I think there's got to be a respect of making your teammate look good and thinking about pro company first. And as a result, it's understanding, this is what makes them tick. This is how they want. And it requires empathy, EQ, all of it. But it has to be, you know, when you work, especially in a startup, you come from such different worlds, and that is a diversity of thought that should be a superpower. And if you're thinking about the win, you're not thinking about yourself or the other, you're thinking about the outcome. And then all of a sudden that distance allows that collaboration.
Yeah, for sure.
I was going to say the same thing as like when there's conflict or sometimes clinicians, when you come out of academia particularly, you're used to the hierarchy. You're like, as the attending, you're at the top of the hierarchy and you get to make the decisions. But really at a startup, it's like everyone's viewpoint, everyone's created equal to some extent, right? And there's not that hierarchy that you're used to. What I was going to say is that I think that it's so critical to what you said, and that I think that, sorry, I'm losing.
You lost your train of thought?
I
so excited you lost your train of thought.
I just had my election brain invaded
It's all
me.
good, Jess.
It invaded me.
I'll pivot us.
Yeah, please pivot. Please pivot.
So I love all the comments, and I think there is, I do this podcast with clinician leaders. I only just started it, so it's a lot of fun. But one of my mentors, Manal Patel, who I'm looking at John here in the front, is a mentor of yours too. He's a physician and an entrepreneur and a health plan exec, and he's done it all. He said, he's a primary care doc, and he said, you know, even in my clinical world, I had to ask for the help and expertise of others around me. You know, I needed an infectious disease specialist. I needed a cardiologist, right? And in my business world, I do the exact same thing. Like, I have to acknowledge that there's stuff I know, and there are other experts who bring really special skills, knowledge, expertise to our team. And he said, my role as a CEO is not different than my role as a primary care doctor. You know, I have to tap into the expertise of those around me. I think that sort of is reflected in a lot of what you guys are saying. So I'm going to switch gears a tiny bit. Guys, I don't see any questions coming up here. I don't know if that's because you're so wrapped in this conversation that like you're not, it's not working, you say. Broken? Okay, I'm glad I asked because I didn't see any. All right, well, we can handle broken. That's okay. So just collect in your brains your questions, and I will ask you to raise hands and point on you in a moment. So we are at 12:03, so we have a little time. There is a thing a lot of us have discussed, which is how your role changes over time and how you handle it. I went from a CMO of a 10-person company to the CMO of a 1,000-person company plus another 2,500 clinicians and getting acquired by United. Those are very different CMO roles. I know you guys have also navigated growth in your companies. And how have you handled that? And what have you had to do to really navigate change? Title doesn't change, but your role is really changing. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, all of you, I think, can probably contribute here. So,
I have a coherent thought now. So one thing that I knew coming to the company, I knew was my weakness was giving constructive feedback or critical feedback. It was really hard for me. I didn't have great role models in the academic medical world growing up in there, and And so I knew that was a weakness. And so one thing that I did was I just said it to the whole team. I said to our leadership team, like, I'm not good at feedback. Like, I'm good at positive feedback. And so I had to learn a lot from the people around me, and I asked for help. And I think it's okay to show, like, it's really important to show vulnerability when you don't know something, and not pretend like you know it all. Like, I'm the first one to say I don't know it all. And so that was really helpful for me.
Right. Mona, I know we've had this conversation.
Yeah,
What do you have
well,
to say?
I mean, it's that I didn't know what I was getting myself. I mean, I kind of thought I knew what I was getting myself into when I skipped out of academia into InStride, but really, it has been quite the ride, right? So, seed stage, Series A, now we're in Series B. And people keep asking me, what is my role as chief medical officer? And I'm like, it depends on the day. And I think so it's a know thyself. Like, I love that. And so early stage, it was like I got to do it was just we're kind of in it together, doing all the things and really figuring it out. And now in series, like as we were kind of in our like growth phase, we talk about giving away Legos, like figuring out how you delegate, how you're not going to know every single thing that's happening. And so my thing is surrounding myself with people who are smarter than I am and ensuring that I trust them, and really figuring out how we are in this together. This is not about any one individual. This is about the company and the mission, and making sure that we believe in what we're doing and that we know where we're going and that we're all going there together. And again, some days are way better than others. And so it's also catching ourselves and recognizing we're going to make mistakes and owning it. We actually had this happen in our company most recently, where we like admissions and kind of who's our patient population, and some of our clinicians being concerned that are we taking sicker patients than we can treat, and others saying no, we need to take sicker patients that we can handle way more, and it's recognizing that these conflicts are going to arise. And on the one hand, it's do we just kind of sugarcoat and not address it company-wide? We decided to, in our all-hands meeting, just say, here's the dilemma, here's what we're struggling with, and here's how we want to better understand before we dive into problem solving. And we got such incredible feedback. I will say, I was sweating the entire time we were having this all-hands, because I was terrified by being vulnerable in front of everyone. And simultaneously, it was just this incredible feeling of like, no, we're all rowing in the same direction towards something that means it's not about the individual, and if we trust each other, we'll get there. I hope we'll get there.
I love it.
I wish I could be terrified to be vulnerable. I tend the opposite direction of incredible vulnerability. But I'll say, Motivo's 6 years old, and my job has been completely different every single year. And this last year has probably been the hardest for me, because before it was like my advisor Rick told me, in the early days you were making 100 decisions a week, small decisions. Yeah. What is the subject line of this email? Review this, look at this. What design do you like here? And now I'm making 3 to 4 huge decisions a year. There's somebody to do all of those other little things now. And really for me, I've had to honestly, I've had to do a lot of internal work on where my worth and value comes from, because I don't know if anybody else deals with workaholism, but for me, it's I equate my worth and value with my productivity, and so to not have as much stuff to do, or those easy, quick wins of answering something in Slack has been really hard for me. It's a lot more of a mental challenge of thinking about the company and the direction we're going. I've found it to be difficult.
Yeah, I think that self-awareness is key. Erin looks like she's going to pick up the mic, and then I'm going to do my best Phil Donahue and come around and ask. Raise your hands if you've got questions, and I'll catch. Oh, wow. Anyone over here? All right. You were late to raising your hand. Go ahead. Yeah?
I was going to say, going from seed to C, I feel like it's been a lot of zooming out and then zooming back in, and zooming out and zooming back in, and it's been really helpful. My co-founder and our CEO, Christina, will sometimes say to me, I understood why you gave away that Lego. Take it back, please. And so I think really having some flexibility, that sometimes just as important as it is to let go, sometimes it is good to bring our expertise back.
100%.
Nikki wants to answer too.
That is
Sorry, one quick thing. So, when I became CEO and co-founder of the company, I did it to show my girls, I have 2 teenage daughters, to work boldly and to show them, I thought, that, take risks, and show that you can just take on the world, right? Okay, 3 years later, now I realize that really what I'm showing them is that you fail. and you still get back up. And that success zigs and it zags, and that it doesn't define you, and your worth is not attached to it, and that it makes for an interesting next chapter of your life.
Yeah.
But very different than my bold beginnings, for sure.
Yeah, I love
Humbled.
it.
I'm very humbled.
Humility, self-awareness, willingness to change. So we had lots of questions. Raise your hands again. I guess you were the first.
Okay. Hi, my name is Gabby. I'm currently a student at Harvard Public Policy School and Public Health at Chan, and then just finished my MBA at Stanford Business. And so my question for you all is, how did you define success in which pathway to grow and which investors to partner with? In terms of, many of you talked about this VC path. There's pressures to grow in that way, but there's also other forms of entrepreneurship, and I'm curious if you ever considered those as I'm exploring which one to take, maybe a slow and steady path versus hyper growth, and how have you balanced that?
I'll
Thank
say
you.
something very quickly.
Such a great question.
I never thought I would be in this world, right? I mean, again, I'm married to an entrepreneur. I was like, you do that, I do my academic thing, we're good. And I got a call from Liam, who's in this room at 46 Ventures, and it was just an honest conversation about what the possibilities are there. And so I would say, if you go the VC route, choose your investors carefully. It matters. There's so many different ones out there, and with different things to offer. We are so lucky at InStride. Our entire board are people who we believe in, they believe in us, and they all have their way in which they've really helped us move forward in our company. And so I would say that is part of why we're successful. But again, I think we've been in this fortunate position to get to be very picky about who we take our money from, and I do think that's been a privilege for us.
And I wouldn't think that it's only one path or the other. I mean, Mona and I didn't realize how similar we were. My husband's also an entrepreneur. I was going to work at, for the government forever. I wanted to be the stable one. But,
Stability's so nice.
But we built clinical programs in medical universities, right? So you do entrepreneurial things in lots of different settings, and they really are translatable as you move. So you were mentioning nonprofit. My co-founder ran a nonprofit before, taking VC funds to start Equip. So I wouldn't think that they're mutually exclusive.
There is something to be said about, so we're seed stage, and I unrealistically thought that I could go a little bit further with angel investors. So I raised a little over $1 million from angels, and then I was trying to decide, do we go down the angel or the venture? And I think it comes down to, actually Liam also asked me this question, what do you want, right? What is your vision? Because I think that what I was trying to suppress was my desire to bring Family Well to everybody. I wanted this big vision, and I was trying to convince myself out of it. And so Liam, when you asked me that question, and I also agree that you have to have the right investors, and very fortunate to have 406 as our lead, is what do you want? And I think that then you figure out the source of funding to match that vision.
Yeah.
I'll quickly say a lot of this I think is also determined by the market when you're raising. I would love to say we had tons of term sheets to choose from. We did not. It was very hard for us to raise money, and it's equally very hard for founders to raise right now. So I'd be happy to talk to you after this because I have a lot more thoughts about it. But it's not easy to raise money right now, and I think we got lucky that we raised when we did, and it wasn't necessarily it had a lot more to do with the market conditions than it did Motivo.
In the interest of time, because I think we're standing between you guys and lunch. 2 minutes is what's remaining on the clock. You, my friend, who I don't know, Dr. Colleen Long, gets the final question. And if you'd like, my golf ball from this morning, please go ahead.
So I'm finding it a challenge. I'm a bootstrapped entrepreneur. I've been in practice for 7 years, and I think it's been really hard to find investors because a lot of the feedback that I'm getting is scale to 3 million EBITDA or more, and then we'll be happy to talk to you. And it's really difficult. I mean, in 7 years, I've taken it as far as I can go without the capital to tech enable. So how do you make that leap from where I am to where you are?
Maybe two of you can answer.
I would say ask Liam. He'll tell you what to do.
I know it's a
all.
406 Ventures commercial, but a Liam Donahue commercial.
I think it depends on like what you're trying. I think it depends on what. I actually agree with that. Ask Liam. It depends on like the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And like, and I think that a lot of it is the market, right? Like, you know, there are certain topics like AI right now that are very hot. But I think it's about the problem that you're solving and making it, like if you do go venture, really thinking about your scope. And is it a big enough problem and a universal enough problem that you're trying to solve to get that funding? There are a lot of ways to grow beyond where you are, I'm sure, without venture funding. But it's sort of like, what is the problem? Is it big enough? And how much money do you need and what do you need it for?
I would add, if you don't have a co-founder, I would get one, and I'd get one who's very different than you. It is definitely a marriage that will drive you nuts sometimes, but it's also the reason really, really great things happen, especially as a clinician, to have someone who obviously complimented me, but also could be fast when I was being overly thoughtful, who could dream bigger when I was thinking about the patient right in front of me. So and also there's so many highs, but also some lows. It's really nice to go through it with someone. So
I don't have a co-founder, and I'm somewhat sane. So I agree. I wish I had a co-founder, but you can also do it without.
So we are at 12:15 here. So many great questions, I'm sure, coming in the audience. This lovely group of people has offered to set aside a couple of tables in, let's say, the back of the lawn for lunch, if people have more questions and want to come and sit with us and have further conversation, because I know lunch is the next thing. So follow us to the lunch area. Don't harass us, but before you go, wait, a huge round of applause for these ladies.